He moved like a spirit among the living. The woman asking to see his cattle didn't know she was about to stir a ghost. Silas Ward hadn't spoken to a woman in 20 years, not since the fever took his wife and left him emptier than a dry creek bed. Yet there she stood at his gate, dust on her boots and something in her eyes that made his chest ache with a feeling he thought long dead. The sun bore down on the cracked earth of his ranch, where 50 head of cattle grazed behind fences he'd repaired with his own hands more times than he could recall. He'd turned this land into a fortress of solitude, where only the wind and the lowing herd dared speak. No visitors, no neighbors, no intrusions. But Coraline came as if she belonged. Her dark hair was pinned beneath a faded bonnet, her calloused fingers resting on the wooden rail. She didn't startle when he stepped from the barn, didn't recoil at the sight of his tangled beard or the loose hang of clothes on his thin frame. Instead, she smiled, a warmth that made him want to retreat into the shadows again. "I hear you raise the finest cattle in 3 counties," she said, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't place. "I'd be honored to see them, if you'll allow it." Silas's throat tightened. 2 decades without conversation had left him raw, and the sound of a woman's voice on his land felt like a trespass into holy ground. His instinct was to turn away, to vanish into the comfort of hay and leather where ghosts of his wife couldn't reach him. But Cora's eyes stopped him. She didn't look at him with pity or curiosity as townsfolk did on his rare supply runs. She looked at him like he was still a man, one who mattered. "They're just cattle," he muttered, his voice rough as gravel. "Nothing's ever just anything," she answered softly, and the way she said it made his hands tremble. He found himself walking toward the gate, each step breaking the vow he'd made to keep the world at bay. But just as his fingers brushed the latch, he froze. Hoofbeats, several, coming fast, and nothing good ever came at a gallop in broad daylight. Cora heard them too. The confidence in her gaze flickered like a candle in wind. 3 riders appeared through the dust, hard-faced and sweating horses beneath them. Silas knew the lead rider at once. Dutch Morrison, a man who collected debts in blood as often as in coin. 2 younger men flanked him, cold-eyed and cruel, brothers by the look of them. "Well, well," Dutch drawled, reining in his horse near the gate. "Silas Ward, the hermit of Broken Creek. And who might this fine lady be?" Cora stepped closer. Silas caught the faint scent of lavender and dust, a scent that struck him like a hammer of memory. Sunday mornings, braided hair, lost laughter. But beneath her calm there was steel now, a readiness that told him this woman wasn't ordinary. "Just a traveler admiring the stock," she said evenly. Dutch's laugh cracked the air like breaking glass. "Admiring livestock, are we?" "That's funny," Dutch drawled, his tone like poison honey. "Because I heard tell there's a woman matching your description asking questions in town. Questions about certain business dealings." Silas felt the blood drain from his face. Whatever storm Cora had brought to his gate, it was the kind that left corpses in its wake. He'd seen Dutch Morrison's work before, charred homesteads and shallow graves that coyotes finished digging. The smart choice would be to step aside, let fate run its course and retreat to his cattle in solitude. But when he looked at Cora, her jaw set, her hand steady against danger, something long buried sparked in his chest. Maybe it was the ghost of another woman who'd once faced the impossible. Maybe it was 2 decades of guilt begging for redemption. "Ladies on my land," Silas heard himself say, his voice carrying more steel than he remembered having. "That makes her my concern." Dutch's grin spread, yellow teeth flashing. "You're concerned, Silas? You haven't had concern for anyone in 20 years. Don't start now." "Times change," Silas replied, and realized he meant it. But as Dutch's fingers drifted toward his gun, Silas knew some changes demanded blood as payment. Standing between Cora and 3 armed killers, he wasn't sure his rusted courage would last till sundown. The cattle grazed on, unaware of the violence gathering at their fence. Dutch's hand hovered like a coiled rattler. But before he could strike, Cora stepped forward. She placed herself squarely between Silas and the men, and when she spoke, her voice carried a quiet authority that made even Dutch hesitate. "You're Dutch Morrison," she said. Not a question, a verdict. "I've been looking for you." The words hit Silas like a hammer. This wasn't chance. She'd come here with purpose, his ranch just a stage for someone else's war. Dutch's amusement darkened. "Most who come looking for me live just long enough to regret it." "What's your business, lady?" "My name is Cora Lane," she said evenly. "And you killed my brother." The air seemed to freeze. The horses shifted nervously as the weight of her words sank in. Silas's mouth went dry. He'd stepped into a blood feud blind. Dutch smirked. "I've killed plenty of brothers. You'll have to narrow it down." "Thomas Lane," she said. 3 months ago outside Millerville. You shot him down in the street because he couldn't pay your boss." Dutch's smile sharpened. "Ah, Tommy Lane. Begged like a dog before I put him down. That what you came to hear?" Cora trembled, but it wasn't fear. It was fury, hot and pure as lightning in a summer storm. Her hand slipped toward the folds of her dress and Silas's stomach turned cold. She hadn't come to ask questions. She'd come to die. She'd chosen his ranch as her battleground. "Easy now," Dutch warned, spotting the motion. 3 against 1's bad math, even for a woman with fire in her gut. But Cora wasn't looking at him anymore. Her eyes found Silas's, and in them he saw the same emptiness he'd once seen in his own reflection. She wasn't planning to live through this, only to drag Dutch Morrison down with her. "You don't have to do this," Silas said quietly. "Not here. Not like this." "Yes, I do," she answered, calm and certain. Dutch's hand was just closing around his gun when the first shot cracked the air. But it didn't come from him or his men. It came from the pasture. A rifle. The sound was followed by the furious bellow of a bull. Someone else was out there, another player in this deadly game. Silas spun toward the noise, eyes searching through the haze of dust and cattle. A tall man in a dark coat moved through the herd, using the chaos as cover. He moved like someone who'd made a living out of killing and surviving it. "Damn it to hell," Dutch snarled, torn between Cora and the unseen shooter. "Marcus, Billy, circle behind the barn. I'll deal with this." But before they could flank, another rifle cracked. This one hit home. Billy Morrison cried out and toppled from his saddle, clutching his shoulder as his horse bolted away. "Billy," Marcus shouted, wheeling his mount toward his fallen brother instead of obeying Dutch's orders. And in that heartbeat of confusion, Cora moved like lightning. Her hand came out of her dress holding a small derringer, its twin barrels glinting under the pitiless sun. She had it aimed squarely at Dutch's chest before anyone could move. But Silas saw the tremor in her hands, born of grief, not fear. "This is for Tommy," she said, her voice raw with fury and pain. Dutch Morrison was quicker than a man his age had any right to be. But 20 years of guilt had honed Silas's reflexes sharper than most. He caught Cora's wrist just as she fired, jerking her aim wide. The bullet hissed past Dutch's ear instead of through his heart. "You fool!" Cora cried, twisting to break free. "He murdered my brother." "And now he'll murder you," Silas shot back grimly, watching Dutch's gun slide free of its holster. But before Dutch could squeeze the trigger, another rifle cracked from the pasture. The bullet slammed into Dutch's horse, dropping the beast hard and pinning its rider beneath flailing hooves. Dutch's revolver went flying, landing uselessly in the dust. "Who is that?" Cora gasped, still straining against Silas's grip. He didn't answer, because he didn't know. But as the shooter stepped from behind the panicked herd, rifle steady, Silas's blood ran cold. The man was older than expected. 60, maybe, but built solid, with silver hair and eyes as pale and merciless as winter sky. "Hello, Silas," the stranger said calmly, as if they'd met for coffee instead of amid chaos. "Been a long time." And in that moment, Silas knew. He knew exactly who had come for him, and that his 20 years of peace were over. The name fell from his lips like a curse. Edmund Carver, the man who had destroyed his life, stood among his cattle like he owned them. Rifle trained, gaze steady. Edmund Carver, bounty hunter, killer, and the reason Silas Ward had become a ghost of a man. The reason his wife lay dead, his home burned, his heart turned to stone. "You remember me?" Edmund said, almost pleased. Good. I worried isolation might have rotted your memory. Cora looked between them, her derringer still in her hand. You two know each other. We have history, Silas said hollowly. The sight of Edmund had torn open every buried memory of that terrible night, when desperation became damnation. Dutch still writhed under his dying horse, cursing as he tried to reach his lost gun. Billy had dragged himself behind a water trough, bleeding badly, while Marcus sat frozen, torn between fight and flight. Touching reunion, Dutch rasped, spitting dust. But I've got business to finish. Edmund turned his rifle toward him with chilling ease. Your business is finished, Morrison. Has been for 3 months, ever since you killed the wrong man's brother. The words snapped the puzzle into place. Thomas Lane hadn't just been another debtor, he'd been family. Edmund Carver's family. You're working together, Silas said, glancing between them. Thomas was my nephew, Edmund said. Cora wrote me after Dutch killed him, asked for help finding his killer. I didn't know you were his uncle, Cora whispered. Only that you could find men who didn't want to be found. Finding men is what I do, Edmund said flatly. But when blood's involved, it becomes personal. Marcus made his choice. He spurred his horse toward his wounded brother, hauled Billy up, and fled in a storm of dust, leaving Dutch to his fate. Cowards, Dutch roared, eyes blazing. You think you'll kill me, old man? I've got friends who'll hunt you to the ends of the earth. Your friends don't scare me, Edmund replied. I've been dying for 20 years already. Silas flinched. In Edmund's eyes, he saw the same hollow emptiness that lived in his own, a man with nothing left to lose. That made him deadlier than Dutch could ever dream. Why here? Silas asked quietly. Why bring this to my land? Edmund's smile was cold enough to burn. Because I knew you'd be here. And before I settle things with Morrison, you and I have a reckoning of our own. The truth hit Silas like a thunderbolt. Edmund hadn't come just for Dutch Morrison. He'd come for him. Cora's vendetta had only given the old killer a reason to finish what he'd started 20 years ago. The weight of 2 decades crashed down on Silas. He released Cora's wrist and stepped back, mind drowning in memories he'd buried deep. The job gone wrong in Copper Falls, the betrayal, the night that ruined them both. You were supposed to be dead, Silas whispered, disappointed. Edmund's voice was calm, but the rifle never wavered. I lived through that night, Silas. Barely. 6 months in a doctor's bed, learning to walk again after you put 2 bullets in my back. Cora looked between them, confusion rising like heat off dry earth. What are you two talking about? What happened 20 years ago? Tell her, Edmund ordered. Tell her about Copper Falls, about the bank, about the people who died because you chose greed over decency. Silas felt the ground sway beneath him. The secret that had eaten away at him for 2 decades clawed its way out. We were partners, he began, voice rough. Edmund and I. Robbed banks, trains, only men who could afford to lose. We had rules. No innocence, Edmund's jaw clenched. Until Copper Falls, you broke every damn rule. It was supposed to be empty, Silas whispered. Just a manager and a guard. But a woman and her little girl came in to make a late deposit. My wife, Edmund said, his voice cracking like old timber. Sarah. She threw herself over that child when the guns went off. Died in my arms while you ran off with the cash. Cora's breath caught. Your wife? Sarah Carver? Edmund nodded. She followed me to town, begged me to quit. Walked straight into hell instead. Dutch Morrison, still pinned under his horse, let out a dark laugh. So the great Silas Ward, the ghost of Broken Creek, was a murderer all along. I didn't kill her, Silas said quickly, eyes on Cora. I tried to stop it. I shot Edmund to keep him from killing anyone else. Edmund's bitter laugh echoed across the dust. How heroic. Shame it didn't save her. The silence that followed felt heavier than gun smoke. Silas had spent 20 years believing he'd done the right thing, believing that shooting his partner had saved lives. But now, face to face with the man who'd lived with the same ghost, he wasn't sure of anything. So what now? Cora asked softly. You kill him? Will that bring her back? Edmund's finger tightened on the trigger, then slowly eased. No, killing him won't change a damn thing. I came here to end it, but looking at him now... His voice faltered. He's already dead. Just like me. Cora lowered her small pistol, the barrel aimed toward the ground. Then why bring me here? I needed him to hear the truth, Edmund said. About Sarah, about that night. I know what happened, Silas said. No, you don't. Edmund's voice hardened. You didn't shoot me to stop the killing. You shot me because you were afraid of what I'd do when I saw her bleeding. The words hit Silas harder than bullets. Deep down, he knew Edmund was right. He'd told himself it was mercy, but it had been fear. Sarah forgave you, Edmund said at last, tears streaking through the dust on his face. With her dying breath, she told me to forgive you too. That was when Dutch made his move. He tore free from beneath his horse, grabbed his pistol, and fired. The bullet struck Edmund in the shoulder. Then Cora moved like lightning. 2 shots cracked, echoing off the hills. Dutch Morrison fell dead beside his horse, eyes wide, mouth still sneering. That was for Tommy, she said quietly. Edmund clutched his bleeding shoulder. Clean through. I'll live. Unfortunately, Silas moved without thinking, helping Cora steady him. The years of isolation melted as he acted on pure instinct. Let's get you to the house. We'll clean it up. Why help the man who came to kill you? Edmund asked. Because Sarah was right, Silas said softly. Hatred ruins everything it touches. They walked toward the porch, 3 broken souls bound by old sins. Cora glanced back at the gate, where the bodies lay still. What now? Now we patch him up, Silas said, opening his door for the first time in years. Then we figure out how to live with it all. And after that? She asked. He looked from her to Edmund, then to the quiet horizon. For the first time in decades, the future didn't look empty. After that, Silas said, voice steady, we learn how to be alive again.